Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come to extract every penny, because in this video I'm going to build an absolute kick-ass gaming PC with loads of performance that is suitable for 1080, 1440 and 4K gaming, and I don't want to say on a budget, but without sort of getting carried away. And throughout this video we're going to walk you through all the components that you need to do this. We'll show you everything that's good, maybe some things that could be improved. We'll walk you through what is a very, very exciting chassis, and I've been excited to build on this for ages. Let's hope it actually stands up to the scrutiny. And then of course we're actually going to get gaming on this system to walk you through the full gameplay benchmark numbers so you know exactly how this performs in the latest and greatest titles. So all that's left to say is an absolute massive thank you to both Zotac and Nvidia for sponsoring this video. Let's get started. And I want to start this video by talking about something that you've never heard in your life. I guarantee no video has ever been started in this way before, because inside this door here is a lavatory, and obviously this is like a studio, so I never used that, and it's been about 2 months since I even went in there. And essentially what's happened, because it's the height of summer, the water level in the toilet has dropped down, and essentially the room is filled with this horrible drain smell today. There's a really warm smell, and the whole place smells of drains, which isn't very nice. And I came in here and it was a little bit weird, and then I opened that door and then you just got this waft. It was 10 out of 10 drain smell just entered the entire house and this studio. So I've got to deal with that. Thankfully you don't, because smell-o-vision isn't a thing just yet, so count yourself lucky. There you go, sidebar complete. If you didn't like the story, smash the dislike button.
And I won't see it.
Moving back to more normal affairs though, I do want to talk about the graphics card first, and obviously this should always be the thing really that you choose in your parts list before anything else, as it's going to directly dictate your in-game performance more than any other component, and obviously it will sort of tell you how much you can spend on other components as well when you have your budget set out. The one that we've got on our desk is from Zotac. It is the 4070 Ti Super, this one being the Trinity Black Edition. And the 4070 Ti Super, I've said it before, I'll say it again, is pretty much my favorite card of this particular NVIDIA generation, purely because it does offer a lot of flexibility. I mean, if you want the best value, obviously something more like a 4060 is going to give you that. But if you are prepared to spend a little bit more, but you don't want to sort of go to like 4080 Super, 4090 level, then I think you'd be really pleased with this actually, because as long as you're happy to use things like DLSS and DLSS frame generation and the super resolution, then there's not really much that this card can't do. I mean, yes, if you want to do like ultra settings, path tracing, 4K native, you're going to need more horsepower than this. But realistically, I think as long as you are happy to use those technologies, and in my experience, especially on this card, they do work really well. It just gives you all-round flexibility really. So it gives you all the performance that you need for a super high-end monitor without the cost associated with the more expensive graphics cards. I also like the fact that this is large, but it's not crazy big, so it's going to fit into quite a few different size cases, even if you've not got the absolute largest one in there. You do have the 12 pin on this as well, which means it's a little bit tidier and easy to plug in. You've got a backplate on top. You will not have a not for retail pink sticker on the top, which, note to Zotac for like future like samples and things, don't put it where we can see it. It's a little bit annoying. Moving back to the top of the card, you should find some RGB when you turn this on. Obviously you can control this with software and things. If you don't like the way that is by default, then you've got 3 display ports on the back and 1 HDMI 2.1. So if you have a high-end TV, you can do 4K 120 output, which is what I use for my personal system with my LG TV, and it does work really well. So nice, fairly compact for a larger size card, and certainly ready to go in our system. But while of course the graphics card is the most exciting part of any gaming PC build, as it's obviously the heart of your system, you do actually have to buy a case to put it in, and this is going to personally reflect you, and obviously you're going to, I mean, it literally reflects you because it's got glass on the side. It's going to reflect your personality, and obviously you want something that's going to look good, and hopefully that you can upgrade for years to come and be a really proud centerpiece, if you like, of your desk. And this is a brand new chassis from Cougar, and I've been really excited to build on this because, if I'm honest with you, when they first sent it out, it kind of like sat there and I had so much to do and I didn't really think too much and didn't look into it that much. And then I saw this thing at Computex, and oh my word, as you can probably tell, is this an attractive chassis? And it seems to get everything right on paper at least. So you've got ventilation on the side, so you can still have like, not dual chamber, but you can obviously have extra cooling there. You've actually got more ventilation underneath as well, as you do have a fan inside this that will blow towards your graphics card. But then obviously the star of the show really is this curved glass panel on the front. But I also like the size of this as well, because it is large and is going to support most graphics cards, but because it's not dual chamber, it doesn't take like too much space up on your desk. So I'm pretty excited actually to get building on this, and so far it does seem to be relatively easy to take apart, but I will say that the mechanism for actually attaching this curved glass to the front could use a fair bit of improvement because it's quite hard to get back on. Once you've done it, obviously fine, but if you're someone that regularly upgrades your rig, that is going to get annoying. But all of the pieces are essentially toolless, so you can just remove them like that, including this top piece. Got USB-C on the front as well, and then 2 USB 3s, as I will now demonstrate. But as you can see, you also get the benefit of something that's going to be really easy to build in, because all of these panels do just slide off, and then you have loads of room to actually work in and sort of reach around and get everything sorted. I realise as well, by the way, I probably should show you this fan that's here, and it's quite cleverly done as long as it works, where it is actually a pop-out fan that has these pins on the back, and then that's already pre-routed down the bottom. And if you wanted to swap this out, you can actually get a turntable. So you could put like a figurine or something here that will spin at the front of your PC if you didn't want the ventilation, of course. But this should just pop back in and push into place. But I know what you're thinking, enough talk. Let's actually get our build started. So quick fire, shall we? Let's proceed to our motherboard. Obviously the platform that you're going to need, and it is important to buy a decent motherboard. This one is from Gigabyte Aorus. This is the B650 Aorus Elite AX. B series is pretty much the way I'd recommend to almost everyone if you're building a gaming PC, but you've pretty much got two choices really when it comes to boards. You can either go for B650 or B650E. And in a nutshell, if you go for B650, then chances are this slot here is going to be PCI Generation 4, which is fine for every single graphics card essentially on the market today, even like a 4090, great. But if you're someone that maybe upgrades your motherboard and your CPU like every 5 years or so, then chances are within that 5 years you might want to upgrade to a graphics card that is PCI Generation 5, and then your board could, in theory, actually limit the performance that you're going to get. So if you went for E, you would cover off that eventuality. But to be honest, we don't really know how much difference that's going to make anyway, and that's assuming that you're going to buy like a top-end graphics card or maybe a graphics card that is only 8x on PCI Gen 5. So I don't think it's going to be a huge problem. So you might want to consider B650E for future-proofing, but for most people I think it's a great way to save yourselves a little bit of money and get more performance in your system today rather than necessarily worrying about tomorrow. But let's place our motherboard down on top of the box and then give you a very quick walkthrough. We have our CPU power at the top here, our ATX power on the right. We have our RAM slots, of which we want to use slots 2 and 4. So let's open these up now so that we don't forget. CPU is going to go here. If we need to remove the mounting, then it's this bit here, depending on the cooler that we're going for. Sometimes it will use these pre-fitted bits. Other times we'll have to replace these, but don't worry, it is very simple. Our SSD is going to go here, and depending on the board that you get, this could be PCI Gen 3, 4, or 5. Usually you want to use the top slot because it has the best bandwidth, but again, depends on the motherboard that you go for. Graphics card is going to go down here. If you have any old-fashioned SATA drives, they will use this port here. Then we have our USB 3 for the front panel alongside our USB-C. We've got RGB headers on the top here. If you've got 4 pins, then this is the standard RGB. If it's got 3, it's called addressable RGB. We have our CPU fan connection at the top here as well. So if you're using a standard air cooler, this is how it will fit. But if you're using case fans like we are here today, then you have other headers dotted around the rest of the motherboard. USB 2, our front panel connections to actually get our case to power on when we press the button. That is located down the bottom. And then all the way on the left, we have our front panel audio. So if you're using like an analog pair of headphones or a headset, plug it into the case, and again, it talks to the motherboard and actually works. But now you're an expert on everything motherboard, it is of course time to actually get our CPU installed. And I don't want to say that this is going to be controversial, because I'm sure a lot of people will do this, which is why I want to do it in this video. So we're actually going for potentially a slightly under-spec CPU here. So this is a Ryzen 5 7600, and in terms of pricing in the UK, you can get this for under £200 now. It's quite literally a steal, and the performance you get on this is awesome. Price to performance, even in like high-end titles with high-end GPUs, is great. But you will potentially find that with something like a 4070 Ti Super, especially if you're playing at 1080p, you might run into some CPU bottlenecking. But as last week I did a similar build to this with a 4070 Ti Super and a 7800 X3D, which is probably the chip I personally would go for if I was building this, I thought actually it'd be more beneficial to show you what would happen if you went for a slightly more inexpensive CPU, and you can see whether it actually affects the games that you want to play, and then compare it against that video and then make the right informed choice. And besides, bearing in mind that there is going to be a replacement for all of these Ryzen 7000 chips in the not too distant future, in a way you could save yourself some money, go for this, get the higher end GPU, and then when the newer processors come out, obviously you could upgrade to those then, assuming that they are actually worth buying. But as always, the choice is entirely down to you. Just grab your chip out of the box and very gently lower this down into the socket, and then just place this back down with this lever. The lever does require a fair bit of force, by the way. I know this is going to scare a lot of people, but it's normal. With our processor installed, we can then move on to our memory or our RAM, and this is DDR5, because of course this is a DDR5 platform. Don't buy DDR4, don't try and reuse it. It won't fit and it definitely won't work. The main thing really that you're looking out for is that if you're going for an Intel build, I would go for XMP, but if you're going for AMD, buy one that has an AMD Expo kit, because essentially this just gives you a higher degree and higher chance of compatibility at getting that full rated speed. So this is actually a 6200 megahertz kit, and the CAS on this, which stands for CAS latency, it's recursive, is actually C32. So this is not only a very fast kit, but it's got low latency too. But I wouldn't worry too much about it. Just don't buy a really cheap kit and don't buy a stupidly expensive one either. Try and get something in the middle. If you are wondering about capacity, by the way, 16 gig is absolutely fine, but as we go into the future, more and more games are going to want to have 32 gig of RAM, and there isn't a huge price difference for DDR5 between 16 and 32. So as long as you can afford it, I would always recommend going for 32. But obviously the benefit of RAM is that if you do need more and you have extra slots, you can just double it up. So it is a very easy upgrade in the future. And then once you've done that, it's finally time to actually grab your screwdrivers, the standard Phillips crosshead, one big, one small, and then you can pick up your SSD. And this is pretty much the king of price to performance at the moment, but as we always say, sale prices and things on SSDs means that I would usually just go for a really fast one that's on sale rather than a specific SKU. But if you're looking at like pure value, then the Crucial P3 Plus is a fan favorite. This is PCI Generation 4. It's got similar-ish speeds to something like a PlayStation 5 in terms of its reads and writes, so should be fairly reliable. And to install this, you literally just unscrew this top slot. Make sure that you do remove the plastic film that you have on this, and then you can just grab your SSD, line this up with the slot, click it into place with the little plastic nubbin, and then grab your cover and just gently replace it. Next step is going to be to grab your case and just lay this down flat like so. All of the standoffs are pre-applied, so literally all you need to do is just grab your board, give it a slight wiggle until the central one kind of catches the rest of the board. Then you can grab your screws that come in the box, and then you can just secure this down into position. I've actually taken out this PSU shroud that you can put fans on if you want, or you can just obviously use it to reach in and sort of like drag cables and through and stuff. I really like this so far. It's certainly been quite easy to work in. But let's see if that continues once we do actually open this up and grab these front panel connections and get them installed. As we've already shown you, our front panel just connects down here at the bottom. USB-C next to the RAM, USB 3 all the way at the bottom, addressable RGB on the left, fan header in the middle, and then HD audio at the bottom left. Now that that's done, I'm going to complete the look of this chassis by adding a few extra fans. And Cougar sent these out. They're the A-Polar 120 ARGB, and these are actually daisy chainable, which are cool, but I have not used these before, so we'll see if they're any good or not. Inside the box, it looks like we have some cabling, maybe a controller. I mean, actually, no. It seems as if you don't actually need one, because you have 3 different blocks, depending on how many fans, obviously, you want to daisy chain together, and then they just connect with addressable, and then your standard 4-pin fan. So should be quite easy and should also reduce the cable clutter, which is good. But what do these actually look like? That is the big question. Well, for many of you, a fan, but they certainly seem to be quite well built. Obviously plasticky, but they're fans, that's absolutely fine. And you have some RGB on the side. This is almost like reminiscent of Lee & Lee fans, but they've definitely gone down their own route, which is nice. But should we see how easy they are to actually clip together? Are they magnetic? Is it really as straightforward as that? No. Oh, okay. And then what? They just push in? Yeah, that was very straightforward. Not as easy as magnetic, but then plenty of strength there. So maybe that's the best way of doing fans. Do you then do the same with the top? Yes, certainly looks like it. Let's put one here at the back as an exhaust, and then we'll grab these other 2 and use these as an intake on the side. I mean, actually, I was about to say so far so good, but then I've just realized that now I've got a load of addressable RGB cables to plug in and not enough headers. Is there really not a splitter in the box? No. Well, that's a missed opportunity. And I mean, they don't even daisy chain either. So you're going to have to buy an adapter basically no matter what.
Really?
Good thing I have a spare in the studio. Regardless of whether you do decide to use a controller or a splitter though, don't of course forget to actually plug those fans in as well. Here I'm just using the top header and then one at the bottom. Well, only a mild faff complete. It's now time to move on to my least favourite bit of any build.
The radiator.
Because as we know,
I hate radiators.
But to be fair, recently they've not been too bad. It's just a combination of loads of fans, loads of cables, loads of faff essentially. This is a brand new one for the channel. This is from Montech Hyperflow ARGB 360. I think you can get this for around about 80, maybe 90 pounds here in the UK. So it definitely undercuts most other all-in-ones, especially ones that are 360 in size. And I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, let's be honest, a lot of people go for an all-in-one liquid cooler, not just because they need some cooling for the CPU. I mean, a 7600 does not need a 360. People actually do this because they want it to look good. And this is why I've sort of integrated it here, because I think a lot of people watching this probably will want to go for something like a 7800 X3D. So if I put an air cooler in this, I think it would ruin the look, and a lot of people are going to be upgrading the CPU anyway, which will need better cooling. So yes, let's see if this is actually any good. Have they pre-fitted the fans? They have. Thank you so much, Montech. Thank you so much. You have not saved my day, but you've helped me out. Now see if you can fix my drains. Let's grab this AMD hardware out of the box and just lightly screw one of the springs onto this bracket, repeating with the other side. And then we can grab our now ready to go liquid cooler, which has got me very excited. And then assuming you are actually using this in the correct orientation, i.e. that you've got the fans blowing into the radiator and out, so essentially at the top of your chassis. I mean, actually I need to remove this and route the cables through to the back, and then you can pick up the unit as a whole. Once again, forget that you've forgotten to take the screws out of the bag. Then just fit one into position, lightly hold with the other hand, and then do the same with another, and then of course just repeat with the rest. Then you can remove the default retention arm that's actually fitted for Intel, replace it with the one that we prepared earlier for AMD. Should just push that until it clicks, and then this whole unit should then just go on top of your CPU before clipping on to those plastic clips that I said some coolers you will remove, some you will keep. Oh, I'll put it on back to front. Forget it. I did think something was wrong. Let's just finish the job with a screwdriver. Then we can get these dangly cables, route them through at the back, and then plug them in at the top. Right, hopefully we're now approaching the finish line, which means installing our graphics card on our power supply. And in order to get this installed, obviously very straightforward, just remove these slot covers for slots 2 and slots 3. Because this is an NVIDIA 40 series card, as we'll show you in just a little bit, you can have access to things like DLSS, super resolution and frame generation, which are AI features that can actually help you in-game, in addition to awesome ray tracing performance in the latest titles. But let's grab our Zotac GPU, insert our Trinity Black, and then I think you'll agree, this perfectly matches the theme. I know we're kind of cheating a little bit because it's obviously like a blackout build, but it looks really awesome, doesn't it? I'm going to be so tempted to remove that label. I think Zotac might get a bit angry, but it might have to happen. No one saw this. I will put it back in the box. Rule breaking aside then, I think it's just one more component to go, and that is the power supply. And that was almost close because I had not done the box up. This is from Corsair RM750E. You need roughly a 700 watt unit for this rig, but if you are using like a 7600 or like a lower wattage CPU, you could probably get away with using an older one if you wanted to. But we always stick with the official recommendation, which is 700 watts really for this. So 750 is good to go, and obviously you save yourself a little bit of money versus an 850 or 1000 that chances are you won't ever properly use. As you can clearly see, it is fully modular, so you only need to plug in the cables that you actually need. And because this is the latest revision, it does actually come with a PCI Generation 5 cable as well, which is nice. So it just plugs into 2 Type 4s at the back of this and goes straight to your PSU. It's a nice little cable as well. It's like fairly rigid, it's not got any color to it, and it is going to make your rig look that little bit better. Does it say what the wattage is on this? No, it doesn't, but because it's a 750, I wouldn't really want to use this with like a 4080 or a 4090 anyway, so for this, should be ideal. Should be a super simple installation, although you do have to move the cables that you've already pre-managed out of the way just to line this up. Then you can reach into your system, place this against the back, screw it down into position, feed our power cables through to their respective places, and Cougar also get marks for the perfectly placed hole in this chassis for a power cable. I don't know why so many companies get it wrong, but they do. So you can grab this PCI Gen 5 connection and making sure you push it in as tight as possible. Get this safe and secure into your GPU. Then you can pick up this ATX and insert this next to the RAM. And then last, but certainly not least, you have your CPU up here at the top. There is actually enough clearance to do this relatively easily. But if you're using a different case or thicker radiator, it makes sense with a modular power supply to plug this cable in before you do anything else. But that, I believe, actually should be everything. Bearing in mind we were adding extra fans, wasn't too complicated. This was without any extra cable management. I've been sort of doing it as I've gone. Obviously things to sort of neaten up with like extra straps and ties and things. But generally speaking, it works okay, but I would prefer that they were like more robust clips or something, because these come out really easily. Other than the channels that they assign for you, there's not really that much like dedicated space that you can kind of cram things in besides the large space that you have at the bottom. But generally speaking, it's been pretty easy to work in so far, and as long as everything does continue to work when you press the power button, I've actually been pretty impressed. Not the cheapest case in the world, but I think it's going to look pretty special. But of course, whilst building it is always the fun bit, the most stressful bit is actually seeing whether it works. So we've grabbed ourselves our 4K monitor, and then we've got our PC-centric mouse mat, which you can buy down below at pccentric.store. And then let's actually see if this works. Oh, well, we have fans, we have noise, but are we gonna get a load of RGB lighting? Oh, there we are. All white, actually. No RGB, but we've got decent lighting. I like that. I think this is a really matched system, actually. I'm really excited to get the glass on. Although actually, as I alluded to earlier, putting the side panels on is not the easiest thing in the world, and this mechanism is frankly rubbish. Our PC works though. But here it is, the final piece of the panel, and our rig is now complete. And I don't know about you, but this definitely stands out from the crowd and is something a little bit different. The Cougar fans I like, but obviously you are going to have to daisy chain them. I would say if you can buy a hub, that's probably the best way of doing it, rather than having like the big splitter I used that just added a load of bulk here. But I think you'll agree this is a really attractive system, and it's just waiting to be customized. Should we do the peel? Wait, what? That's still attached. I didn't want a double peel. Oh, this does at least come off easily. If that had left a residue, I would have been angry. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, as you can probably tell from the fact that we are set up and ready, we are now all ready to go. And I think you'll agree that this is a truly stunning gaming PC build. I actually like the white that we had. Clearly the motherboard remembers it from a previous build. I think it really works here, but obviously you could go for any color scheme that you like. I just like how everything blends in. It's not actually the largest case in the world as well. It kind of almost looks a little bit bigger than it is, which is nice, but again, when you compare it to like a dual chamber chassis or something, it's not going to take up ample space on your desk. So as a showpiece, this really works. I mean, I know you can get that turntable for the front, and if you are into your figurines and things, then obviously that makes sense. But realistically, the way we've got this set up at the moment for all of your cooling, I think it's going to work wonders. But let's actually jump into some games and have a look. And I actually want to start off with some Ghost of Tsushima. That's right, I've been playing the game, so I know I said it wrong in the last video. And actually, I've been really impressed with not only the way that this looks, but how well it runs. This is a PlayStation game, and they have done wonders in porting this across, not only in terms of the way it runs, but also in terms of the options and the fact that you can get it to sort of scale up and look as stunning as this. What you're actually seeing at the moment is with DLSS Super Resolution, we've got the set to performance, and I'll be honest, I will hold my hands up, I thought this was running at DLSS balance because the image quality looks really good, so I must admit I kind of surprised myself there. Frame rate wise, we're getting around about 100, 110 FPS or so, and this is without using the DLSS frame generation tool, which of course is almost like a bit of a frame smoothing feature where it will increase your frame rate by generating a frame with AI in between individual rendered frames. So if we want to turn this on, I can go into the settings. This is also running at very high, by the way, which is the max preset available. But we go into display, here it says DLSS, and obviously you want to go all the way down to the bottom to this feature called frame generation. Make sure you set this to DLSS frame generation, and then we can jump back into our game to actually see what that's done to the frame rate. And as you can see, it has of course increased it. We're now looking at around about 130 to 140 FPS, so it's added about 30 to 35 FPS or so in terms of image smoothing. And because we've got such a high frame rate in the first place, like the latency is not an issue at all, we're getting around about 42 milliseconds. Again, remember, PC-Centric's golden rule, aim to have your game under 55 milliseconds for a AAA title, and you'll be really happy and impressed with the overall smoothness and responsiveness. But yeah, it's just a really good example actually of how the DLSS suite works. I think a lot of people don't fully understand that it really can improve your gameplay in a very significant way. But pressing swiftly on now to something completely different, this is Alan Wake 2, and this is the new Night Springs DLC. And no, you're not imagining this, and no, it's not a bug. The game really is this pink at the moment. That is just a design choice that they've gone for. It is a bit annoying, but I think it's very much only temporary. But anyway, what you're seeing here is actually the high quality preset. We've got this running with DLSS outputting at 4K, but rendering performance mode, so that's 1080p. And we do have DLSS frame generation on as well. And if you actually look at the latency figure, you can see that it is a little bit higher than I'd like, around about 60 to 70 milliseconds. I will say that in Alan Wake, for whatever reason, it doesn't feel as bad as the latency would suggest. Like quite often you feel like you're kind of steering your character, but I'm not getting that impression at the moment. So I'm not sure if that figure is wrong or whether it's just not such a big deal in what is a slower paced game. What I've done now is to actually disable frame generation so you can see what the latency is like with this figure turned off. And obviously, as you'd expect, the frame rate has now gone down to around about 70 FPS or so, but our latency is around about 45 milliseconds or so now. So it is definitely going to feel a little bit tighter, especially if you're using a mouse and keyboard. This should make a little bit of a difference, really. And of course, speaking of ray tracing, by the way, you're probably wondering how this fares. And I've now turned this down to 1440p, as obviously most of us really have 1080 or 1440p displays. And I've actually turned ray tracing to low now. Otherwise, everything else is the same. And as you can see, we're getting around about 65 FPS, and our latency is around about 45 milliseconds or so. So obviously, as you turn down some of the settings, you will get some of that latency down, and that of course will allow it to turn other settings like ray tracing on. So especially if you are going to be using a controller with this game, anything really between like 50 and 70 FPS is going to be an optimal way to play. Obviously higher is always better, but in something like this, it's not really the end of the world. And as this is such a visual game, it does allow you to obviously use the ray tracing properly. So there's a lot of good reflections here. You get really nice lighting, especially when you're using torches, and obviously the light kind of like fills up the room in the most realistic way possible. It's a really, really cool game. Just for reference, by the way, if you do want to turn on DLSS 3 frame generation, then you are going to get an even higher frame rate, of course, but your latency is going to increase. So we're getting around about 65 milliseconds or so of latency, and our frame rate is just under 100 FPS or so now. So I think this is going to be, for a lot of people, the right way to play, but again, find the settings that work for you. But let's press on to some multiplayer titles now, shall we? Starting with some Halo Infinite, and this is actually running at native 4K, and I'm always very impressed with the frame rate in Halo, actually, because we're not using any image scaling techniques or anything like that. And as you can clearly see, we're getting around about 105 FPS at high settings, which isn't too shabby. I have noticed that this game is less popular now because the wait time for games seems to have increased, which is a bit of a shame because I think it's really good, but I suppose I'm not really helping because I haven't played this properly in ages. True story, when I played the campaign of this, the save corrupted literally on the last mission, so I still haven't finished Halo Infinite, and I don't know whether I can bring myself to do the whole campaign again just to get to the end. But yes, that's my story, around about 103 FPS. But let's see what happens if we turn this down to 1440p, shall we? We'll select 67% on the resolution slider, and yes, as you can clearly see, the frame rate has now increased, about 150 to 170 FPS now. So even if you're rocking like a 1440p, 240Hz monitor, whilst you aren't going to be fully saturating it, it is going to come pretty close. And hey, you could always turn that resolution slider down a little bit more if you wanted to, but I'd say on the whole, Halo, on this, really buttery smooth. Alright, I answer your cries, despite the fact that I've not seen it, but I've heard that the new Battle Pass is also causing a load of grief. Let me know about that down in the comment section below. But as you'd expect, we're starting this at 4K resolution, which for a multiplayer title isn't actually what I would usually recommend. But of course, the thing is, when you're getting around about 100 to 150 FPS, do you actually need to turn the settings down? I mean, in terms of latency, we're getting around about 15 to 20 milliseconds at 4K, which is not too shabby whatsoever. I mean, I have said this before and I'll say it again. This is actually a title that doesn't have DLSS, but you can use NVIDIA NIS. So in the settings, what I'd advise doing is actually outputting this at 4K, but then sort of setting a lower render resolution in the NVIDIA control panel. And then this way you can still get really high visual quality and better than 1440p visuals, but then you are going to get an even higher frame rate than what we are now. And as we've already mentioned as well, if you are rocking like a super high resolution monitor, maybe one of these new 4K 240Hz panels, this is going to be the best way to sort of unlock the performance there. But it is very, very impressive that even if you are going to be playing on like a 4K TV, 4K monitor, anything really that is super high res, you're just not going to have to worry about the frame rate when you're playing something like Apex Legends. Really impressive. And then last, but certainly not least, we're going to open one more title. Definitely not because I closed everything down forgetting that we hadn't done our thermal tests and our noise tests. We have some Returnal, and this is probably my favorite ray trace title at the moment. This is running at epic settings, including ray tracing, DLSS performance, and as you can see, we're getting about 120 FPS or so. But I've said it before and I'll say it again, if you haven't played Returnal, you can get it really cheap in the sale now. Highly recommend it. Another one of those PlayStation ports actually that runs really well on PC, especially on NVIDIA hardware when you do enable the ray tracing. But in terms of thermals and temperatures and stuff, what we're getting around about 64 degrees or so on the GPU, so absolutely nothing to worry about there. I mean, if you were hitting 80s, I'd be worried. Anything under 70, really, really good. And then on the CPU, about 57 degrees. And actually, I've seen this sort of running like flat out when we were installing the games, and we were hitting around about like low 70s on the CPU. So actually that Montech cooler doing a really good job of providing an affordable option, but not like limiting our performance. Not that a Ryzen 7600 was ever going to run particularly hot, because it's obviously a lower wattage chip. But on the whole, I think I'm really impressed with this actually. I would still recommend upgrading that CPU just to give you a little bit more headroom in certain titles. It's not really proved an issue here today, which is great, especially at higher resolutions, but depending on what you play, you could run into potential bottlenecks. Other than that, as I say, I love the chassis, I love the way it looks. I like the fact as well that it can sit on your desk and not take up too much room. But the question very much goes out to you on this. What do you make of our rig? Other than maybe the CPU that's a little bit underpowered, but has actually done very well today, are there any changes that you would make? Do you love this case as much as I do, or do you think that curved? Do you think that curved glass is just a waste of time and money? We'd love to hear from you, so let us know down in the comment section below. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this, get yourself subscribed, and of course, if you do want to check out current pricing on anything featured in this video, you can find it listed down below. But thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.